Today we are in for a treat as Mr. Randall Hixenbaugh discusses his specialty, ancient Greek helmets, and the selection he has on view at his gallery in the Upper East Side of New York. Randy, nice to see you.
Nice to see you, Lily. So, ancient Greek helmets are a fascinating, historical artifact that survives from the ancient Greek world, and an interesting collecting field for a number of reasons. Quite a few of them survive. Surprisingly, large amount of ancient Greek helmets have survived, owing to the fact that there was two practices that led to their preservation, either burying a complete suit of armor with a deceased hoplite, a warrior, or the capturing of armor from an opponent and the dedicating of that to a god or goddess at a temple sanctuary. Both of those practices led to a fair amount of ancient Greek helmets surviving to the present day. In the overall corpus of helmets that survive, we can discern three distinct types. The Corinthian helmet, the most iconic form, the closed form with only these sort of almond-shaped openings for the eyes, but otherwise a helmet that really deprives the soldier of sensory perception. The Illyrian helmet, which was contemporary with the Corinthian helmet through the 6th and 5th century BC. This is a simpler form with this sort of quadrangular opening for the face. Not quite as protective, perhaps, but the soldier would have been able to see and hear a little bit more of what's going on. And then the later type that follows both the Corinthian and the Illyrian is the Chalcidian type. This is an example that probably comes from an Eastern Greek workshop, probably located along the Black Sea, where they particularly tended to tin the surface of these helmets to give them a little bit more eye appeal, I suppose. But the innovation here is that now the cheek pieces are not fixed, they're hinged, they can be removed, they can be flipped up. There's a wide opening for the face and a large opening for the ears. And this will eventually become the Roman Republican and Imperial helmet, a more versatile helmet form.
Can you walk us through the Corinthian and sort of how they were made and the technological innovations that accompanied some of the aesthetic?
Yes, it was challenging from the get-go to produce an effective metal helmet. The earliest helmets, Corinthian helmets, are usually made in two parts, two sort of hemispherical pieces that are riveted together, which is not really a great design. The problem with hammering the helmet up from a single sheet of bronze is that that whole process weakens the metal over and over and over again. Something to sort of make up for that is to anneal the helmet. After it's been hammered up, you can heat the thing till it's red hot, and then the metal sort of falls into place a little bit better. So what we see is the early helmets are somewhat rudimentary, just sort of a bell form that sits close to the soldier's head. So one of the great innovations that occurs in the Corinthian helmet is this sort of carinated bubble that's formed at the top. So the helmet now sort of hugs the side of the head and leaves space at the top. So the blow to the top of the head is not going to be affecting your skull. These helmets are all very light and thin. It was important, that a soldier on the march is not carrying a lot of heavy gear. So a helmet like this probably would not have protected a soldier from a direct blow from an iron spear, which is what his opponents would have been using. It would have protected from the slings and arrows and lacerations and glancing blows. But we see helmets, for instance, that show they've probably been punctured in battle.
Okay, so that's a puncture mark, not something from a trophy.
It's hard to tell, but this helmet is indicative of a helmet that's most likely dedicated to a sanctuary for a number of reasons. It shows a lot of damage. Some of that is more than likely battle damage.
Okay.
And then damage that occurred after the battle. Removing the helmet from the deceased adversary often resulted in bending and twisting the helmet to get it off of literally the bloated corpse of the defeated adversary in the hot Aegean southern battlefield. So I see that evidence on a helmet like this. Furthermore, a helmet like this, is taken to a sanctuary like the Temple of Zeus at Olympia and dedicated. These helmets very often have inscriptions. And here we have a punched inscription that was made after the initial manufacture of the helmet either naming the person who dedicated the helmet or perhaps the enemy who he killed on the battlefield and took it from. This says Gellius, Gelliu in the genitive form, of Gellius, from the city of Megara.
That is cool.
So yes, this object, though it's long divorced from its archaeological context, can tell us quite a bit. This is an early, almost certainly Peloponnesian workshop, these simple rudimentary forms.
And we're talking early 6th century?
Late 7th century.
Late 7th.
Yeah, late 7th into the early 6th.
Whereas this one, the more canonical type, still pretty early as...
This is sort of the end of the Archaic period, the end of the 6th century. This would have been on the battlefield right up into the Peloponnesian Wars. Battle of Marathon, Thermopylae. This is it. This is the pinnacle of the form. It has all the design innovations. It's light. It has this carinated space. It has this decorative, what are sometimes called eyebrows, but I believe there's horns, because we see so much imagery of horns on helmets.
Bull horns,
yeah, and also rams quite a bit. You know, animals that had an association with power and moving forward and tenacity. They're looking for that sort of sympathetic imagery on or iconography on these things.
Can you talk a little bit about, I mean, how are these things? Were these bespoke to each warrior?
Generally, yes.
In the Archaic period?
At this period, it seems there's such a wide variation of types and quality of manufacture, ranging from, well, for instance, to look at the Illyrian helmet. This is an early Illyrian helmet of a kind of a more simple rudimentary form with these large rivets that were meant to secure an inner lining. About, say, 100 years later, this helmet form is still being used, but this is a different workshop making the same general form, but in many ways a much more high quality helmet.
Very refined.
Exactly. Yeah. And although they no longer have the rivets to secure the inner lining, they're probably just wearing a cap or balling up their hair underneath the helmet.
Right.
Stylistically, they felt that the border still needed to have this what's now a pseudo rivet border.
Okay. And of course, what we're missing on all of these things is the plumes and crests.
Exactly. So we would have had a horsehair crest stretched with probably a leather housing through this channel, attached with a rivet here and a rivet in the back, which are lacking.
Okay.
Now, these two helmets also demonstrate the difference in what nature can do to the helmet over time. This helmet was purportedly found in the Danube River in Austria, coming out of an old Viennese private collection.
So that wonderful gold patina is actually the result of it being deposited in a river, freshwater.
Correct.
For a length of time.
It's somewhat counterintuitive. One would think that a watery situation would add to the corrosion of the helmet, but it's actually not a watery situation. It's being sealed in the silt or the gravel of a riverbed that creates an anaerobic situation where there's no oxygen exposed to the surface. So we're seeing here a helmet that very much looks like it would have looked in antiquity. This is the bronze. Now, granted, we know that these helmets were often painted, and all of the other bits that we mentioned, the crest and whatnot, are lacking. But the surface of the metal, fresh bronze, would look like this. And it's only in these rare instances of a perfectly preserved, hermetically sealed tomb or freshwater bog or river situation. So we get an interesting look at what the surface would have looked like, as opposed to this other Illyrian helmet over here, which is much more typical of what we will find, a helmet that shows all of what happens when it's been buried underground for quite some time. So now the bronze surface is interacting with the moisture in the soil, and literally the alloy is beginning to revert back to its natural ores. The green malachite formations, this interesting blue azurite formation, and we probably have some reddish cuprite areas as well. Also, we can see this helmet was probably crushed under the weight of the earth. It's a little bit disfigured now, and there are some losses either in antiquity or as a result of the burial and later excavation. Still an honest helmet in pretty good condition. They can be much worse. You know, helmets, the metal can crystallize, they can be completely disfigured and crushed.
Yeah.
So we still see very much the original form of the helmet, but with a pretty heavy patina at this point.
Okay, and speaking of patina, then you have the tinned Chalcidian here. And so is this more or less the original surface?
Yeah, one would think so. I think that the tinning, supplied tinning on the surface, which was really particular to Eastern Greek workshops, that were probably producing helmets for a sort of a more barbarian clientele in the interior of what is now Ukraine and southern Russia. It's a little bit more garish of a design. Um, and even these swirl patterns, even though this is undoubtedly coming out of a Greek workshop, that type of design is not typically Greek. It's sort of more of a European.
I can see
Celtic looking. So yeah, I think that this is a well-preserved helmet with its original cheek pieces, and the tinning probably served to prevent the heavy oxidation of the surface. In fact, in the interior, there's more oxidation than there is on the exterior.
Huh.
And this is sort of the later phase. All of these design elements that they've been working on and improving over the years sort of come to fruition in the period after Alexander the Great. More mobile combat units, soldiers on horseback, naval invasion, sieges, all of these things make that sort of iconic early Corinthian helmet not terribly useful.
It's not what you want on horseback. And
we actually see a number of those early helmets that enjoyed such a long service life that the soldiers that were wearing them or inherited them modified them. They cut the cheek pieces off. They cut openings for the ears later on because the helmet itself is still really a valuable commodity that was difficult to produce. So it's better and easier to modify.
To upgrade. Very, very interesting. Well, thank you, Randy Hixenbaugh. And if you want to buy the only book that comprehensively covers the subject, you should go to Randy's website and make your order.